The smell of fresh coffee mingled with the damp morning air as Helena walked through the back door of the bakery, as she had done every day for the past 3 years. Her shoes were no longer their original color, faded by the sun and rain, but they still served their purpose of carrying her from one side of the city to the other without complaint. She was 26 years old, but her eyes carried a weariness that seemed to belong to someone much older, someone who had already seen too many promises vanish like smoke. The bakery was located on a forgotten corner of the old city center, on one of those streets where tourists didn't pass and where the facades still held the memory of a time when that neighborhood had been important. Helena had worked there since her mother fell ill, first as a helper, then taking over the counter, the orders, the cleaning, everything that Donna Marlene, the owner, no longer wanted to do. The salary barely covered the rent for the small room she shared with her mother, but Helena never complained. Complaining required an energy she no longer had. That morning, as on every other, she arranged the loaves of bread in the display case with the care of someone arranging flowers in a vase, even knowing that no one would notice. There was something in her that insisted on doing things well, even when no one was watching, even when the whole world seemed to have decided that she didn't deserve attention. It was around 8 o'clock that he first appeared. A gentleman with completely white hair, his back bent by the weight of years, walking with a cane that seemed more like a traveling companion than a support. He wore a worn gray coat, the kind that holds the smell of mothballs and stories that no one wants to hear anymore. His eyes, however, had a strange gleam, a lucidity that contrasted with his frail body. He entered the bakery, looking around as if searching for something that wasn't there, or perhaps as if trying to recognize a place that no longer existed. Helena watched from the counter, waiting for him to approach, but the old man just stood there, confused, holding some coins in his trembling hand. "Can I help you, sir?" Her voice came out softly, unhurried, as if she had all the time in the world. He looked at her and for a moment seemed surprised that someone had spoken to him. I wanted some bread, but I don't know if I have enough money." Helena looked at the coins in his hand. They weren't even enough for the smallest loaf of bread in the display case. Donna Marlene would have sent him away with an impatient gesture, but Donna Marlene hadn't arrived yet. "Do you like cheese bread?" The old man nodded slowly, as if the question was too important to be answered quickly. Helena took 2 still warm cheese breads, wrapped them in a paper napkin, and handed them to him. "These just came out of the oven. They're the best. But I don't have—" "You'll pay me next time you come," she said, and smiled. It was a small, almost shy smile, but genuine. The old man took the loaves of bread with both hands, as if holding something precious. He didn't say thank you with words, but his eyes did, and Helena understood. From that day on, Sue Antonio, as she came to know his name was, began to appear at the bakery every morning. Always at the same time, always wearing the same gray coat, always with the same expression of someone who doesn't quite know where he is. Helena soon realized that he was suffering from some kind of mental confusion, perhaps the beginning of dementia, perhaps just the loneliness that corrodes the memory of someone who no longer has anyone to talk to. She never charged him for the bread he ate. She paid out of her own pocket, taking it from the little she had, hiding it from Donna Marlene, who certainly wouldn't approve. There was something about Sue Antonio that touched her deeply, something she couldn't explain. Perhaps it was the way he looked at her, as if she were the only person in the world who truly existed. Or perhaps it was because, somehow, she recognized herself in him, invisible, forgotten, surviving on the margins of a city that stopped for no one. Weeks turned into months. Helena discovered that Sue Antonio lived alone in an old apartment 3 blocks away. She found out that he had been a music teacher, that he played violin in orchestras that no longer existed, that his wife had died 10 years ago, and that he had a son who lived far away and almost never called. She discovered all this little by little, on the mornings when the bakery was empty and they could talk while the coffee cooled in their cups. "You're the only person who talks to me," he once said, and there was such a deep sadness in his voice that Helena felt her eyes burn. "You have a son, don't you?" So Antonio looked out the window at the gray street outside. Having a child and having someone are different things. Helena didn't answer because there was nothing to answer. She knew that kind of loneliness. She knew the feeling of being surrounded by people and still feeling completely alone. On a rainy Sunday, Sue Antonio didn't show up at the bakery. Helena waited all morning, watching the door every time someone came in, but he didn't come. He didn't come on Monday either, nor on Tuesday. On Wednesday, she excused herself from Donna Marlene and went to his apartment. The building was one of those old downtown buildings with a broken elevator and worn marble stairs. Helena climbed the 4 floors with a heavy heart, not knowing what she would find. She rang the doorbell and waited. Nothing. She rang again. Only then did she hear shuffling footsteps approaching. Sue Antonio opened the door with difficulty. He was thinner, paler, with sunken eyes as if he hadn't slept in days. The apartment behind him smelled of mold and loneliness. "Mr. Antonio, what happened?" "I fell," he said simply. "I fell in the bathroom. I was on the floor for a while. I don't know how long." Helena felt a chill down her spine. He had been left alone on the floor in an empty apartment, and no one had noticed. No one had called. No one had gone looking for him. "Why didn't you warn me? Why didn't you call someone?" "Call who?" The question wasn't dramatic. It was just honest, painfully honest. That day, Helena decided she would take care of him. Not because she felt obligated, not because he could offer anything in return, but because there were things in the world that needed to be done simply because they were right. She began visiting him every day after work. She brought him food, tidied the apartment, checked if he had taken his medication. Sometimes she stayed late, listening to his stories about concerts in distant cities, about the wife he still loved as if she were just traveling, about the son who never called. "You don't have to do that," he said one night, while she was washing the dishes that had piled up in the sink. "I know." "Then why?" Helena paused for a moment, her hands immersed in the warm water. Why? Because life had already taken so much from her that caring for someone was the only way she knew to avoid losing herself. Because when she looked at Su Antonio, she saw her mother. She saw her own future. She saw all the forgotten old people in empty apartments waiting for someone to remember they existed. "Because you deserve it," was all she said. Time passed, as it always does, indifferent to the pains and joys that unfold within it. Helena's mother worsened, then improved slightly, then worsened again. Donna Marlene continued to treat Helena as if she were a useful piece of furniture, never praising her, always finding fault. The neighbors on the street where Helena lived continued to look at her with that mixture of pity and contempt that people reserve for those who work hard and have little. And Helena continued visiting Su Antonio. There were nights when she would arrive at his apartment so tired she could barely keep her eyes open, but she would stay anyway, keeping him company because she knew that nighttime was the hardest time for someone living alone. There were mornings when she would wake up before sunrise to prepare his meals before going to the bakery. There were Sundays when she would give up her only day off to take him to the park, pushing the wheelchair he now needed to use, pretending not to notice the stares of the people passing by. "People are staring," he once said in the park. "Let them look. They'll think you're my nurse or my granddaughter. I don't care what they think." And it was true. Helena had spent her whole life worrying about what others thought, trying to be invisible so as not to give cause for criticism, trying to be perfect so as not to be rejected. But with Su Antonio, for the first time, she allowed herself to be seen as she was, imperfect, tired, but genuine. One late autumn afternoon, as the leaves began to fall from the few remaining trees in the city center, Helena was in Su Antonio's apartment preparing tea when she heard the doorbell ring. She found it strange. No one ever visited Su Antonio. No one knew he existed. "Can you answer that?" His voice came weakly from the living room. Helena opened the door and found a man she hadn't expected to see. He was tall, broad-shouldered, with dark hair that was beginning to gray at the temples. He wore a suit that clearly cost more than Helena earned in months, perhaps years. His eyes were gray like Su Antonio's coat, but cold, calculating, with the expression of someone accustomed to getting everything he wants. "Who are you?" The question came out sharply, accusingly. Helena felt her face grow hot. I take care of Mr. Antonio." "Take care of it?" He looked her up and down, assessing, judging. "And who hired you to do this?" "Nobody hired me. Bernardo?" Su Antonio's voice interrupted, trembling with emotion. "Bernardo, is that you?" The man walked past Helena as if she were an obstacle to be ignored and entered the room. Helena stood in the doorway, unsure whether she should leave, unsure of her place in a scene that suddenly seemed to exclude her. "Hi, Grandpa." Bernardo's voice was different when he addressed his grandfather, softer, but there was still a distance, a formality that contrasted with the intimacy that words should carry. "You came? You finally came?" Helena closed the door slowly and leaned against the wall, watching. Su Antonio was crying, silent tears streaming down his wrinkled face, holding his grandson's hands as if he wanted to be sure he was real. Bernardo looked around the apartment, at the peeling walls, the old furniture, the dust that accumulated in the corners despite Helena's efforts. His face betrayed no emotion, but there was something in his eyes that could be guilt, or perhaps just discomfort. "I didn't know things were like this," he said, more to himself than to his grandfather. "Things are as they always were." Su Antonio smiled through his tears. "But now I have Helena. She takes care of me." Bernardo turned to look at her again, and this time his gaze was different. There was still distrust, but also curiosity, perhaps confusion. "Helena, the girl who answered the door. She works at the bakery on the corner," Su Antonio explained, his voice full of affection. "She gives me cheese bread every morning. She comes here every day. She's the only person who cares about me." The words hung heavy in the air. Bernardo looked away, and Helena saw his jaw clench. Guilt. Definitely guilt. "I've been busy," he said. "Business." "I know, my son, I know." Helena decided it was time to go. "Mr. Antonio, I'm going to leave you with your grandson. I'll be back tomorrow." "No, Helena. Stay." So Antonio extended his hand to her. "Your family." The phrase pierced Helena like a blade. Family. It was a word whose meaning she had almost forgotten. She looked at Bernardo, expecting hostility, but he only nodded briefly, as if granting permission. She stayed. The following hours were strange, tense, filled with uncomfortable silences and superficial conversations. Bernardo asked questions about his grandfather's health, about finances, about the apartment. Helena answered when she knew, and remained silent when she didn't. She noticed that he frequently observed her, trying to understand who she was, why she was there, what she wanted. When he finally left, it was already past 10 o'clock at night. Helena walked through the dark streets to her house, thinking about everything she had seen. Her millionaire grandson reappearing after years of absence. The guilt he clearly felt, but didn't know how to express. The way he looked at his grandfather with a mixture of love and distance, like someone who wants to get closer but doesn't know how. In the following days, Bernardo frequently appeared at So Antonio's apartment. Helena continued her visits, but now they were different. There was a tension in the air, a presence that changed the dynamic of the moments she had learned to love. "You don't need to come anymore," Bernardo told her one afternoon, while So Antonio dozed in the armchair. "I know I don't need to." "Then why does it keep coming?" Helena thought before answering. "Because your grandfather likes me to come, and because I like coming." Bernardo frowned, as if the answer made no sense to him. "You gain nothing from this." "Not everything in life needs to involve profit." He looked at her for a long moment, and for the first time, Helena saw something beyond the coldness in his eyes. Confusion, perhaps, or perhaps the beginning of something he couldn't name. "You're strange," he finally said. Helena almost laughed. "What's strange is someone who has a family and chooses to be alone." The silence that followed was heavy, oppressive. Bernardo looked away first. The days turned into weeks. Helena learned that Bernardo was the CEO of a technology company, that he lived in Sao Paulo, that he had a life she only knew from movies and magazines. He traveled the world, closed multi-million-dollar deals, appeared in gossip columns alongside beautiful and famous women. He was everything Helena wasn't: rich, powerful, visible. And yet, there was something about it that seemed incomplete. She noticed it in the small gestures, in the way he held the phone but sometimes didn't answer, as if the calls were more of a burden than a connection, in the way he looked out the window of his grandfather's apartment at the gray street below, as if searching for something that wasn't there, in the way he sometimes got lost in thought, his eyes empty, his mind distant. "He seems sad," Helena commented to So Antonio one morning when Bernardo had gone out to take care of apartment matters. "He's always been like that," the old man replied, his eyes filled with ancient wisdom. "Ever since he was little, he chased after things he didn't need, running away from things he didn't know he wanted." "Things like what?" "Love, belonging, the things that money can't buy." Helena thought about his words for the rest of the day. The confrontation took place on a Thursday night. Helena had just arrived at the apartment, her arms full of groceries she had bought for So Antonio, when she found Bernardo sitting on the sofa, his face serious, an envelope in his hands. "We need to talk," he said. Helena placed the groceries on the table and sat down in the chair opposite him. Her heart was beating faster than it should. "I ordered an investigation into you." The words fell like stones. Helena felt the blood drain from her face. "Investigate? This is what I do. I check the people who get close to my family." He opened the envelope and took out some sheets of paper. Helena Costa, 26 years old, has worked at the bakery for 3 years. Lives with her sick mother in a one-bedroom apartment in Bras. Never finished college. Never had problems with the law. Never had much of anything, actually. Helena said nothing. What was there to say? Well, what I couldn't figure out, Bernardo continued, his voice lower now, is why someone like you would spend so much time and energy taking care of an old man who can't give you anything in return. Because that's not how relationships work. That's exactly how it works. Everything is a trade-off. Helena looked him in the eyes, and there was a firmness in her that he hadn't expected. Then you don't know what the right kind of relationships are. Silence stretched between them. Bernardo was the first to look away. My grandfather wants me to give you money, he said, for what you've done for all these months. I don't want money. Everyone wants money. Not everyone. Bernardo sighed, frustrated. So what do you want? The question hung in the air. What did Helena want? She wanted her mother to get better. She wanted a job that wouldn't make her feel invisible. She wanted to be loved by someone who chose her, not out of obligation, but out of desire. She wanted a place in the world where she could simply be, without having to prove her worth every second. I want your grandfather to be happy, she said finally. And he's happy when he has company, when someone listens to his stories, when someone cares. Bernardo looked at her for a long moment, and something changed in his eyes. The coldness began to melt, slowly, like ice in the spring sun. "You're real, aren't you?" His voice was almost a whisper. "You really are like that." Helena didn't understand the question, but something inside her warmed nonetheless. From that day on, things began to change. Bernardo stopped treating her like an intruder and began to treat her like... what? Helena couldn't define it. Sometimes he was formal, distant, the businessman accustomed to keeping the world at a safe distance. Other times, he was almost gentle, almost human, as if her presence awakened something he had forgotten existed. They started talking. First about Su Antonio, about the care he needed, about the memories he shared, then about other things, about the books Helena read during her work breaks, about the trips Bernardo took but never quite remembered, about the city they both knew in such different ways. "Have you never left Sao Paulo?" he asked one night while they were having coffee in the small kitchen of the apartment. "Once. I went to the beach with my mother when I was 10 years old. North Coast." "And then what?" "Then life happened." He nodded as if he understood. And perhaps he did understand. Perhaps, beneath all that money and power, there was someone who also knew the weight of the things that life takes from us. Helena began to realize that she thought about him more often than she should. On nights when she returned home exhausted, she found herself remembering something he had said, some expression that had crossed his face. On mornings at the bakery, she would look at the door hoping to see him come in, even knowing he had no reason to go there. It was dangerous, she knew. Men like Bernardo didn't look at women like her. Not that way. They had models and businesswomen and heiresses, not bakery clerks with worn-out shoes and deferred dreams. She was invisible to his world, just as she was invisible to almost everyone else. But sometimes, when his eyes met hers, Helena had the impression that he saw her. He really did see her, and that was both frightening and wonderful at the same time. The near fight happened on a Saturday afternoon. Helena had arrived at the apartment and found Bernardo arguing with an elegant woman she had never seen before. The woman was tall, blonde, with the kind of beauty that seems to have been bought in expensive clinics. She spoke loudly, gesturing with her hands full of rings. "I'm not going to wait forever, Bernardo. You said you were going to sort things out with your grandfather and come back. It's been a month already. Things are more complicated than I imagined." "Complicated? He's just an old man. Put him in a nursing home and that's it." Helena felt her blood boil. She wanted to intervene, but it wasn't her place. She stood in the doorway, trying to be invisible as she always had been. "It's not that simple, Viviane." "It's simple, yes. You're the one making everything difficult. It's always been like this with you, always complicating everything." It was then that the woman noticed Helena. Her eyes assessed her from head to toe, and the contempt was palpable. "Who is that?" Bernardo turned and saw Helena. For a moment his eyes softened, and Helena saw something there that made her heart race. "This is Helena. She takes care of my grandfather." "The maid?" Viviane almost laughed. "You hired a maid to stay with him?" "She is not an employee." "So what is she?" The silence that followed was laden with unspoken meaning. Bernardo looked at Helena, and she saw in him an internal battle, a struggle between the man he was and the man he was beginning to want to be. "She is important." The word echoed in the air. Viviane's eyes widened, then she narrowed them, understanding something that Helena still hadn't. "You've got to be kidding me!" "Viviane, no, don't come up with excuses." She grabbed her purse from the sofa and headed for the door. She stopped beside Helena, so close she could smell the expensive perfume the woman was wearing. "Enjoy it while it lasts, darling. Men like him don't stay with women like you." She stormed out, slamming the door. The silence that followed was heavy, awkward. Helena didn't know where to look, what to say. She felt exposed, humiliated, as if she had been stripped naked in public. "Helena," Bernardo's voice was soft, hesitant. "I'm leaving." She turned toward the door. "No, please, stay." She stopped, but didn't turn around. "What she said is not true." "Isn't that right?" Helena finally looked at him, tears welling in her eyes that she refused to let fall. "She said exactly what everyone thinks, what you probably think too." "I don't think so. You sent me to investigate. You thought I was after your grandfather's money. You treated me like a criminal." Bernardo took a step toward him. "I was wrong. I was scared." "Scared of what?" "From you." The words came out in a whisper. "From someone who does the right thing without expecting anything in return. From someone who is good for no reason. That doesn't exist in my world. That scared me." Helena felt the tears finally streaming down her face. "It does exist. You just weren't looking." He moved closer, and now he was so close she could feel the heat emanating from him. I'm watching now. The first kiss wasn't like in the movies. It wasn't perfect. It wasn't choreographed. It wasn't accompanied by romantic music. It was awkward, hesitant, salty with Helena's tears. It was real. The following weeks were an emotional roller coaster. Bernardo and Helena tried to navigate something neither of them knew how to define. He was a man accustomed to controlling everything, and she was a woman accustomed to having no control over anything. They came from such different worlds that sometimes it seemed impossible to find common ground. But they tried. He took her to dinner at restaurants where Helena felt out of place, but where he made her feel special with small gestures, pulling out her chair, choosing wines she had never heard of but that were smooth and easy to enjoy, never making her feel inferior for not knowing the etiquette of that world. She took him for a walk through the streets of the old town center, showing him the places that were part of her history, the square where she played as a child, the church where she had been baptized, the bakery where she worked, which he had never really seen. "Is this it?" He looked at the simple facade, at the dusty shop window. "It's here." He went in with her, and Donna Marlene almost had a heart attack when she saw a man in an Italian suit in her bakery. Bernardo bought cheese bread and drank coffee at the counter, sitting on a stool that creaked under his weight, and it was the first time Helena had seen him truly relaxed. "I understand why my grandfather likes it here so much," he said, looking around. "There's something, honest about it. It's just a bakery." "No, it's more than that." He looked at her with those gray eyes she had grown to love. "It's a place where people are real." So Antonio watched everything with a wise smile, like someone watching a story he already knew was going to happen. "I told you," he commented to Helena one morning. "Bernardo just needed someone who truly saw him. Not the money, not the power. Him. What if I'm not enough?" The question slipped out before Helena could contain it, carrying all her fears with her. So Antonio took her hand. "You are more than enough, my daughter. You always have been." But not everything was perfect. There were the stares people gave them when they went out together, the whispers that Helena pretended not to hear. There was Bernardo's family, who didn't hide their disapproval when they found out about the relationship. There were his friends, who treated Helena with a superficial cordiality that barely concealed their judgment. "You don't have to go through this," she said one night, after a particularly difficult dinner with executives, who looked at her as if she were a zoo curiosity. "I don't care what they think, but you will care, someday." Bernardo turned to her, and there was an intensity in his eyes that made her hold her breath. "Helena, I've spent my whole life doing what others expected of me. I studied where I was told to study. I worked where I was told to work. I dated who they thought I should date. And do you know what I got out of it?" She shook her head. "Nothing. Absolutely nothing. Money in the bank and an emptiness that no business could fill." He cupped her face in his hands. "You were the first person who made me feel something real. I'm not going to give that up because of people who don't even know me." Helena wanted to believe. With all her heart, she wanted to believe. The crisis came 3 months later. Bernardo needed to return to São Paulo to resolve a company emergency. 1 week turned into 2, 2 into 3. The calls became shorter, more spaced out. The messages colder, more distant. Helena tried not to panic, but it was difficult. She knew that pattern. She knew the sound of silence that precedes abandonment. She had lived through it with her father, who left when she was 7 and never returned. She had lived with boyfriends who promised to come back and then disappeared. Life had taught her that the people we love usually leave. "He'll be back," so Antonio would say, but there was a worry in his eyes that he couldn't hide. "What if I don't come back?" "So you move on, like you always have. But something tells me it won't be necessary." Helena wanted to have his faith. In the 5th week, Bernardo stopped calling. Helena left messages that went unanswered, called and went to voicemail. She felt herself sinking into a well of despair she knew all too well. She had been foolish. I had believed a story that wasn't meant for people like her. It was so Antonio who stopped her from giving up completely. "Go to him," he said one morning. "Go to him? I don't even know where he is." "São Paulo, at the company. You know the name." "And what to do? Beg?" "No. Demand answers. You deserve at least that." Helena thought for a long moment. Her whole life had been made up of setbacks, of accepting what was given to her without question, of being content with the crumbs the world offered. Perhaps it was time for a change. She took a bus the next day. The trip lasted 5 hours, and every minute was torture filled with doubt and fear. What was she doing? What kind of person traveled to another city to chase after a man who had stopped responding to her messages? A person who needed closure, she decided. A person who refused to be silently discarded. The company building was imposing, all glass and steel, the kind of place that made Helena feel small and insignificant. She took a deep breath and went inside. "Can I help you?" The receptionist looked at her with a mixture of professional politeness and curiosity. "I need to speak with Bernardo Moreira." "Mr. Moreira is in a meeting? Do you have an appointment?" "No, but it's important." The receptionist smiled, that meaningless smile. "Without an appointment? I can't." "Tell him Helena is here. He'll want to see me." Something in Helena's voice made the receptionist hesitate. She picked up the phone and spoke softly to someone, her eyes never leaving Helena. After a moment, she hung up. "Mr. Moreira is coming up." Helena felt her heart race. She wasn't prepared. She didn't know what she was going to say, how she was going to react, but it was too late to turn back. Bernardo stepped out of the elevator and stopped when he saw her. He looked older than he had 5 weeks ago, more tired. There were dark circles under his eyes and a tension in his shoulders that she had never seen before. "Helena, that's all." Her name, spoken as if it were a prayer or a curse. "You stopped calling?" "I know. Why?" He looked around at the employees who were pretending not to be paying attention. "Not here. Let's go upstairs." His office was exactly as she had imagined. Large, impersonal, full of expensive furniture and windows that showed the city below like an anthill. Bernardo closed the door and turned to her, and for the first time, Helena saw what he had been trying to hide. Fear. "My mother came to see me," he said, his voice low. "She brought documents, proof that your mother had financial problems in the past. Debts. She said you were after my money, that it had all been planned from the beginning." Helena felt as if she had been punched in the stomach. "And you believed it?" "No, yes, I don't know." He ran a hand through his hair, frustrated. "I didn't want to believe it, but she put so much in my head. So you decided to just disappear, without giving me a chance to defend myself? I was confused. You were afraid." Helena's voice was firm now, firmer than she felt. "Afraid that I would be too real. Afraid that this would be too real. So, at the first opportunity, you ran." Bernardo said nothing. "My mother went into debt because she spent everything she had raising me alone after my father left. She worked until her body couldn't take it anymore, and when she got sick, I worked to support them both. I never stole anything, never cheated anyone, never did anything your mother is accusing me of." Helena felt tears welling up, but she didn't try to stop them. "But none of that matters, does it? Because you've already decided who I am?" "Helena, I came here expecting an explanation, an excuse, maybe, but I think I really came to confirm what I already knew." She walked towards the door. "Your ex-girlfriend was right. Men like you don't stay with women like me." "Wait." She stopped, her hand on the doorknob. "I made a mistake." His voice was broken, vulnerable in a way she'd never heard before. "The biggest mistake of my life. I let fear and doubt take over, and I lost the only thing that mattered." Helena turned around slowly. "My mother spent my whole life controlling me. She chose my schools, my clothes, my girlfriends, and I let her, because it was easier to obey than to fight. But when you came along, you were everything she didn't want from me. Simple, honest, real. And she couldn't allow that. And you let her win." "Yes. And there's nothing I can say that will change that." He moved closer, stopping a few steps from her. "But I needed you to know. I love you. I love you like I've never loved anyone. And I've spent these past weeks dying inside, knowing I'd destroyed the best thing that ever happened to me." Helena closed her eyes. Hearing those words was all she wanted, and at the same time it was terrible. Because love wasn't enough. Love was never enough without trust. "How can I know you won't do it again?" she asked, her voice only a whisper. "How can I trust someone who abandoned me at the first sign of trouble?" "You can't know. I can't promise I'll never make a mistake again." Bernardo took her hands, and they were trembling. "But I can promise I'll try. Every day. I can promise I'll fight for this, for you, even when fear appears. Even when my family or the world tries to separate us. What if that's not enough? Then at least I'll know that I tried. That this time I wasn't a coward." Helena looked him in the eyes, searching for the lie, searching for the deceit. But all she saw was a broken man begging for a second chance. A man who had everything the world considered important, but who was there, vulnerable, pleading for the love of a bakery clerk. "Your grandfather is worried about you," she finally said. Bernardo let out a wet laugh through tears. "I know. He called me yesterday. He called me an idiot. He was right. He's always there." The silence between them was different now, lighter, more full of possibilities. "I don't know if I can forgive you," Helena admitted. "Not yet. I understand. But I want to try." The hope that appeared in his eyes was almost painful to see. "Really? That's true. But it's going to have to be different. You're going to have to choose me, Bernardo. Not when it's convenient, not when it's easy. Always. Even when your mother shows up with more accusations. Even when your friends make comments, you're going to have to choose me. I choose, he said without hesitation. I choose you. The second kiss was different from the first. It wasn't awkward or hesitant. It was a kiss of new beginnings of promise between two people who had seen the abyss of what they could lose and decided to come back. They returned to Rio together. Bernardo's mother made a scene, threatened to disinherit him, said he was throwing his life away. He listened to everything in silence and then simply said, I love you, Mom. It's my choice. So Antonio greeted them with a smile that seemed to light up the entire apartment. I knew it, was all he said. From day one, I knew it. The following months were not easy. There were adjustments, conflicts, moments when the differences between them seemed insurmountable. Bernardo had to learn to live in a world where not everything was solved with money. Helena had to learn to accept help, not to carry everything alone. Helena's mother improved with the treatments they could now afford. She initially met Bernardo with suspicion, but soon saw what her daughter had seen. A man trying to be better than he had been raised to be. So Antonio lived for 2 more years. Good years, full of visits, conversations, cheese bread, and hot coffee. He saw his grandson marry Helena in a simple ceremony in the garden of their apartment, with only a few true friends present. He saw Helena's belly grow and witnessed the birth of a great-granddaughter who inherited his bright eyes. He died in his sleep, one spring afternoon, with a smile on his face, as if he had finally finished the task he had set himself. At the funeral, Bernardo held Helena's hand and said, He saved my life, not literally, but in every way that matters. He saved mine too. No, you saved his, with your kindness, your presence, your love. Helena thought about everything that had happened since that day at the bakery, when a confused old man came in with a few coins in his hand, and she decided to give him 2 warm cheese breads. A small, seemingly insignificant decision. And yet, it had changed everything. Life, she realized, was made up of these invisible choices, of the moments when we decide to be kind when we could be indifferent, of the instance when we choose to see someone when it would be easier to look the other way. Bernardo sold the company 2 years later, not because of failure, but by choice. They moved to a simple house near the sea on the north coast, in the same region where Helena had gone with her mother so many years before. He began teaching music to underprivileged children, using his grandfather's violin that he had inherited. She opened a small bakery where hot cheese bread was served every morning. Sometimes, as evening approached and the children played in the yard and the smell of fresh bread mingled with the sea breeze, Helena found herself thinking about everything that had been necessary to get there. The pain, the rejection, the invisibility, the years of hard work and deferred dreams, the courage to continue being good in a world that rarely rewarded kindness. And then I thought of Su Antonio in that worn gray coat, holding cheese breads as if they were treasures. I was thinking about how sometimes the people who seem to have nothing are the ones who have everything that matters to give. One evening, Bernardo approached her and hugged her from behind, resting his chin on her shoulder. What are you thinking about? In your grandfather's. He would be proud of all of this. Do you think so? I'm sure of it. He kissed the curve of her neck. He knew before any of us that you were special, that what we had was special. He was wise. It was? And do you know what he told me once when I asked him why you did all that for him? Helena turned to look at him. What? He said that there are people who are like stars, that even when no one is looking, they continue to shine, because that's simply what they are, and that when such a person crosses our path, the only sensible thing to do is not to let them go. Helena felt her eyes burning. He said that? Word for word, and he was right. Bernardo held her face in his hands, just as he had done that night when he almost lost her forever. You are my star, Helena. You always have been. And there, in that golden twilight, with the sound of waves in the distance and the smell of fresh bread in the air, Helena finally understood that she had found her place in the world. Not because Bernardo was rich, not because life had become easier, but because, after so many years of being invisible, someone had finally chosen to see her. And that, in the end, was all she had ever wanted.